What's going on, everybody? I was just on the Naturalist Capitalist show the other day, so go ahead check that out. Check out some of my recent podcasts. I got probably about 2 or 3 weeks worth of podcasts lined up in the coming weeks, but since I haven't put out any content in a few days, I figured I'd update some people with just some of the stuff I'm seeing about vaccine mandates. Um, I may do something about the Kyle Rittenhouse case, but my take on that is essentially, if you run up to a guy open carrying an AR-15 or whatever the hell gun he had, and you hit him with a skateboard, I am not in the least surprised when said person fucks around and finds out. That's exactly my take on it. If you approach somebody who is obviously potentially lethal, I don't care what you're doing. It is a horrible idea to go up and try and poke the bear, so to say. I think it's ridiculous, and I think the whole case was an attack on your right to self-defense. It's very, very good that he's going to walk, and it's a shame on all the news networks that have tortured and accused this 17-year-old kid of being a white supremacist and some kind of national threat, or painting him out to be some terrible human being when was he at the wrong place at the wrong time? Yeah. Should he have been there? Probably not. His parents probably should have said, hey, like, you're 17 years old, just hang out at home, don't go there. But the kid didn't kill anybody that wasn't aggressing on him, and as libertarians we all agree that you have right to self-defense. And it's funny to see leftists come out as essentially bordertarians and say that, oh, he was carrying in the wrong state. It's illegal to carry there. Okay, but it's illegal to smoke weed everywhere. But you guys will fight for the rights of people, who get tortured or thrown in a cage for smoking weed or doing other drugs, which I agree with both groups. You shouldn't be thrown in a cage for smoking weed, and you shouldn't, be liable to the police just for brandishing a weapon, no matter where you are, because I feel that's your right to carry and to defend yourself. So it's a little bit longer of a tangent than I meant to go on at the beginning of this video here. But some stuff coming about the vaccine mandates. It's good to see that OSHA has suspended enforcing it. But I'm going to read a few articles here about how vaccine mandates are kind of playing out in the workforce and how some people are interpreting them. This article is from The Guardian, and this one really made me laugh. And they wonder why people are skeptical, but this kind of explains it. The article is titled Chakras, Crystals, and Conspiracy Theories, How the Wellness Industry Turned its Back on COVID Science. Well, if you ask me, science turned its back on COVID science because there's been so much conflicting data, but that's beside the point here. Its gurus increasingly promote vaccine skepticism. It's funny, they spelled skepticism wrong. Conspiracy theories and the myth that ill people have themselves to blame. How did self-care turn so nasty? Before I continue reading on in the article, it's very, very well known at this point that if you're obese, if you have excess adipose tissue, which doesn't necessarily mean that you're obese because different people have different personal fat thresholds, which is basically the point that your fat cells no longer accept the fat that you're taking in and it can no longer store it, so therefore it pours out into your viscera surrounding your organs. That is essentially a reservoir for disease and for sickness. So when people come down with COVID, then they can get a lot more sick because there's a lot more adipose tissue to soak up the the disease. Oslam Demorboga Carr, probably butchered that, is not really into all that woo-woo stuff. Quote, I'm definitely full science kind of person, says the 41-year-old telecoms worker from Reading. She doesn't believe in crystals, affirmations, or salt lamps, but she did find herself unusually anxious during the UK's COVID lockdowns in March 2020. Like many people decided to practice, they spelled practice wrong, good lord, this thing is butchered. I read it too. I'm sorry. And like many people decided to practice yoga as a way to de-stress. Quote, I tried to be open-minded and I was open to advice on trying to improve my well-being and mental health, she says. Just to tap on that last paragraph. Unusually anxious during the UK's COVID lockdown. You are locked in your home. We are social animals. We're tribal by nature. We grew up with tribes. We ran around and killed animals, enjoyed food with people in large groups, in gatherings with our family and friends. Of course, you were anxious. Why is this a surprise? You lock people in their home, they don't want to be locked in their home. People want to go out and do stuff. That's part of living life. So, of course, you're going to be anxious. Anyways, continuing where I left off. So she followed a range of social media accounts, including the somatic therapist and biz coach Phoebe Grainacre, known for her yoga videos, and the quote women's empowerment and spiritual mentor. Kelly Vittingell, the Instagram algorithm did its work. Quote, I suddenly found myself following so many wellness accounts, she said. And we do know, as that quote unquote whistleblower had said, that there are aggressive algorithms on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter that more so show you the content that you're already seeing and the content you would want to see. They kind of essentially want to appeal to your interests, which I get, but at the same time, it is kind of creepy that they harvest your data and then, use that to manipulate content towards you. When the development of the COVID vaccine got underway, Carr began to see posts that troubled her, ranging from polite concern about the social consequences of mass vaccination or the politics underpinning it, to full-blown rejection of the science. The conversation and tone of their posts shifted, she says. At first it was all about self-care and being part of the community that is caring for each other, but then they started to speak more about how there should be a choice when it came to vaccines. They were saying things like, my body, my choice. It is very funny that people who would proudly champion my body, my choice when it came to abortion are now championing or completely against it when it comes to vaccination. And personally, I'm pro-life. That's not what the video is going to be about. Maybe I'll do a video about that some other time. But yes, it should be your body, your choice. And what she's implicating here is that people shouldn't have a choice into whether or not they get vaccinated. People bring up the argument about polio and about all these other diseases, but this is kind of different because COVID, it is a big deal to quite a bit of people, but to the vast majority of people, it's just not that big of a deal. A lot of people get it, they get over it, they're okay, and then they have natural immunity, which, with all the enormous amount of studies that are coming out now, seems to be much, much better than the vaccine. So if you've had COVID, then there is no reason really to get vaccinated. There's potentially only downside. I said that in plenty of other videos. Pretty sure I've said that in podcasts as well. But it's just weird to see people questioning the idea of whether or not you should have the choice to get the vaccine. Not about vaccines, but the question of whether you should be able to make that choice. That's a very, very scary path when you're compelled to do something. Continuing on, Carr watched as Greenacre posted an Instagram story describing vaccine passports as medical apartheid. Vittingell went further in a post in July. Vittingell, who is unvaccinated, compared vaccine passports to the social polarization witnessed during the Holocaust and spoke about the mess caused by the ideology of the Western medical system. Quote, we aren't being shown the full picture, Vittingell it concluded in a post that was liked by Greenacre. Greenacre subsequently invited Vittingell on her podcast, where Vittingell discussed the pernicious influence of quote-unquote big pharma and celebrated the work of controversial Dr. Zach Bush, who had been called a COVID denialist by researchers at McGill University in Montreal. I don't understand the big deal with calling it a medical apartheid because what else would you call a two-tier system where people who have declined taking a vaccine for whatever reason they choose are no longer allowed to have their basic human liberties, that they're not allowed to, be equals to people who've chosen to take the vaccine? That is what they're trying to set up, is essentially a caste system where there are a group of people who don't have basic rights and people who do have basic rights just because they chose to take a vaccine. Any good libertarian, any good person who's concerned about overall liberty in our country, in our world, should be opposed to this because, once again, it should be your choice to take the COVID vaccine. You're not a COVID denialist and you're not anti vax for declining to take a vaccine. You can recognize their potential efficacy, although the more and more information we get, it seems like it's not that great. It seems to wane after some time, but you know what doesn't wane? Your natural immunity. Um, it just should be your choice to whether or not you take a vaccine. I don't understand. No, I do understand because it's about compliance, but it's very strange to see the same people who champion my body, my choice now running completely parallel to that in the other direction, saying that you shouldn't have a choice, that you should have to take a vaccine. Continuing on, such views are anything but exceptional in the wellness community. If anything, they're on the milder end of the spectrum. Anti vaccine or vaccine hesitant attitudes are as abundant in online wellness circles as pastel colored Instagram infographics and asana poses on the beach at sunset. Quote, people are really confused by what is happening, says Derek Bears, the host of the Conspirituality podcast about the convergence of conspiracy theories and wellness. Why is our yoga instructor sharing QAnon hashtags? Um, Most of the stuff I hear from QAnon is just so ridiculous. Trump was supposed to be inaugurated president like 6 times over the last year, and we're going to root out all the pedophiles, and Biden was going to die. I mean, some of the stuff they say is just absolutely ridiculous, but that's not to say that nothing they say is without merit. Um, but in my personal opinion, and I'm not necessarily in the fitness community, I talk about a lot of fitness stuff on my podcast and in my videos, but the reason why they're skeptical of it is because they see that healthy, leaner people don't get that sick from COVID. So, what is the purpose of taking a vaccine when there's no real benefit? Um, Once again, the vaccine efficacy fades after a few months, so people who are more fitness minded just feel like it should be their right to choose whether or not they have the vaccine. So, if they see as the only downside, they're not going to take it. That should be their choice. I don't see the issue here. In May, the Center for Countering Digital Hate, I never even heard of that, found that just 12 influencers were responsible for nearly 65% of anti vaccine content on Facebook and Twitter. Many of these leading anti vaxxers are alternative health entrepreneurs. They're reaching millions of users every day, says Callum Hood of the CCDH. This serious problem, vaccine hesitancy, has become a difficult and entrenched obstacle to dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic. People are skeptical because you're not giving them the truth. When you tell people that if you're vaccinated, you don't have to wear a mask, but then you tell them 2 weeks later that they have to wear a mask again, then people begin to lose trust. When you tell people that if you take the vaccine, then everything's going to go back to normal, and then you tell them that, well, we have to lock down, or, well, you can still spread it. When you talk out of both ends of your mouth like that, then people don't trust you because they feel like you're hiding something. They feel like you're just telling them something so that way they comply, and then, you move the goalpost. People don't trust, our mainstream officials, the mainstream news, the political elite, because they constantly tell them one thing and then do another. We saw this all over the last year. The governors don't care about these rules. They feign like they care, but then they go around and they do stuff that, is completely against their own imposed rules. So of course people are going to be distrustful of it. When I had Spike Cohen on my podcast, he had explained why there's such high vaccine rates in other countries, because they were honest about it. They said, look, this may or may not be that effective. It's probably going to help you if you get sick. So, look, if you want to take it, it's there. If not, don't. It's kind of like the flu shot. COVID isn't the flu, but when you inform people of the truth and they can trust you, then they'll make the decision that they feel is most appropriate. And honestly, probably a lot more people would get vaccinated if, you told them the truth. And if that's your goal, then just tell them the truth, and they'll probably go get vaccinated. I mean, vast majority of people in their 50s, 60s, 70s are vaccinated. Those are the people who are at risk. So, children who are 5 to 11, kids who are, 11 to 25. I don't even think it's a tenth of a percent of the overall deaths from COVID. I did do a video on that, so check that one. I actually linked the CDC website on there where you can check out the chart and see the overall deaths throughout the pandemic, which is now an endemic, at least I would believe. Continuing on, included within the CCDH's quote-unquote disinformation dozen are Joe Mercola, a U.S. wellness entrepreneur called the most influential spreader of COVID-19 misinformation online by the New York Times, Dr. Christine Northrup, Christian, I don't know what the hell that is, a wellness expert who helped popularize the notorious COVID pseudo-documentary Plandemic by sharing it with her 560,000 Facebook followers, and Kelly Brogan, a contributor to the Gwyneth Paltrow's Goop wellness platform. Mickey Willis, the director of Plandemic, is well known in the California yoga scene, while David, quote-unquote, Avocado Wolf, a conspiracy theorist and raw food advocate, is a regular figure at anti-vaccination protests across the U.S. I really haven't heard a lot of those people, and I'm surprised they haven't named some people that I actually listen to frequently. Away from the CCDH's list, other prominent figures include the yoga instructor Stephanie Birch, who has posted QAnon hashtags on her now deleted Instagram account, and Crystal Tenney, a wellness influencer with 169,000 Instagram followers who has consistently posted anti-vaccine content, including one post that compared lockdowns to the horrors inflicted on Polish Jews in the Warsaw Ghetto, comparing the vaccine deployment to... Oh, Jesus Christ, an ad popped up and it messed me up. Comparing vaccine deployment to historic atrocities such as slavery and the Holocaust is a routine trope in anti-vaccine wellness circles. Los Angeles wellness and beauty guru Shiva Rose recently compared vaccines to McCarthyism, slavery, and the Cultural Revolution, the Spanish Inquisition, and the Holocaust all in one post. Woo! Man, really burning through them there. I understand why people would compare it to that, and it is a little bit hyperbolic, and the Nazi cry and saying everything is like Hitler is kind of the easy button to push because that really jars people. It really gets people thinking, and it's very, very easy for people to point to and say this was very bad. So when you identify something like that, or you compare something like that to Hitler, to the Nazis, to the Holocaust, people immediately have that reaction where they think it's bad. You know, it's just burned in our brains from the time we're kids. Unfortunately, communism doesn't have quite the same sting. But that being said, when you force people into their homes and you tell them you cannot go to work, you are not allowed to leave your house, you're not allowed to do this, you're not allowed to do that, you're non-essential. People don't like that. I mean, is that really that shocking when you tell people they're not essential? I mean, really, I'm a mechanic. I fix cars for a living, and I got laid off. Cars break all the freaking time, and I got laid off. So, you know, someone like me who's a blue-collar guy finds a lot of meaning in their work. When you tell people they cannot work, they're not essential, that does a lot to their psyche because people get their value from going to work. At least a lot of people do. Especially in a country like America where we're supposed to be, you know, a country full of rugged individuals who are conscientious and like to do work and like to have tight-knit communities where people come together, blue-collar people, and, you know, we celebrate the culture of America, freedom and liberty. Obviously, we don't have a lot of that anymore, and that's very, very unfortunate. Beres says many of these wellness influencers are quote-unquote using cult leader techniques in digital spaces, sowing fear and hesitancy about the COVID vaccine among their followers, one Instagram post at a time. It's because, like I said earlier, you're not being told the truth. When you're not told the truth, then that gives a lot of people essentially a vacuum to come in and fill that area up and say things that people want to hear that they're not hearing from elected officials. You know, that's the reason why the COVID regime has been so looked upon, you know, very poorly. It's ridiculous that you would tell people that they can't go to work and they're not essential. If anything, the government's not essential. They steal money from productive, peaceful people and use that to pay themselves, and oftentimes to the detriment of other people and to other nations. But if you want to hear about that, listen to my podcast with any of the libertarian people I've had on, and we kind of go into that in a little bit more detail. They maintain, however, that they are misunderstood or misrepresented. When contacted by The Guardian, Greenacre distanced herself from Vittingel's comments on her podcast. It would be incorrect and misleading to your readers to suggest comments from a third party reflect my own, she said. She also said that she used the term medical apartheid to refer to the use of discrimination and segregation based on medical status. For example, treating people negatively based on their medical status by use of COVID vaccine passports rather than anything relating to historical discrimination based on race. I don't see a huge difference here. You're discriminating based on a quality that someone has. This quality being whether or not they're vaccinated. And another time it was discrimination based upon whether or not you have a certain amount of melanin, right? Both are very, very wrong. Now, obviously, I'm not equating the two because racism back in the day was clearly much, much worse than what we have now, or at least, in this current moment. Not that it couldn't get much worse, because it could, but there's a reason why people are saying this is medical apartheid, because you literally are telling people that you are not allowed to do basic things. You're not allowed to go to the grocery store. You're not allowed to go get a six-pack of beer. You're not allowed to go walk in the park. You're not allowed to go to the gym if you do not present a card that says that you underwent a medical procedure, which should strictly be between you and your doctor, or, if you felt like that was the right choice for you. Vittingel, meanwhile, stated that she is, quote, not against the Western medical system. However, I do feel that the industry has been heavily taken over by big pharmaceutical companies who are primarily concerned with finances over health. She defended the work of Bush. He is compassionately trying to help me find more answers, she said. Carr, however, decided to unfollow both women. Now, when she wants to practice yoga, she watches the Sweaty Betty YouTube channel. That's about all I'm going to read from this article. I'll put it below. It's so strange to me that people are so unempathetic, that they're not willing to see the concerns of other people and realize why other people are skeptical. And I'm guilty of it too. I think everybody's really guilty of it because we all have biases. We all listen to people who agree with us, and we should try to listen to people who disagree with us to kind of get more informed of how other people feel and how our opposition feels, so that way we can be better armed or better informed when they come to us with their arguments, to either embolden their points and teach them why your point is perhaps more correct in their interests, or maybe just correct them overall as to why they're wrong. That's very, very important, and I think that's why a lot of people are attracted to debates. When you see people have debates, a lot of people want to hear the exchange of ideas, and that's one great thing about having podcasts and different interviews where people talk about these topics. People want to hear the exchange of ideas, and people are interested in kind of getting to the bottom of things. So continuing on from AARP, what every worker needs to know about vaccine mandates. As people start to return to office buildings after working remote for more than a year in some cases, more employers are taking steps to deter the spread of COVID-19 in their workplaces. One practice that has gained momentum is the requirement that workers either get vaccinated or submit to regular testing for COVID-19. As I said in one of the more recent videos I put up, I am very, very curious. What are the distances that people are willing to go to ensure that this is enforced and that people comply? Do you really want to go to business owners' doors, to their area where they work, and make sure that they're complying with this? Do you really want to go to door to door, to business place to business place, to check vaccine passports, check for negative tests, check for masking? I really don't think there is a strong will amongst police officers to put up with this, to enforce this, And I really don't think business owners want to enforce it either, because you're looking at a 61.7 or 0.9% workforce participation rate. It's not growing fast. There's plenty of people ready to retire, and there's not a lot of people coming in. So, do you really want to squeeze what's left of that out? I really don't think there's a lot of will for it. The increased use of vaccine mandates is a big change from earlier this year when most companies were merely encouraging their workers to get shots, with some businesses offering small stipends or paid time off as additional incentives to get the vaccine, which that's just disgusting. Um, I'll skip along here a little bit. Quote, every organization, every company wants to ensure that they can create the workplace conditions for people to come to work and do their best work. And part of doing the best work is providing emotional and psychological safety, says Margie Worrell, a workplace policy expert and author of Stop Playing Safe, How to Be Braver in Your Work, Leadership, and Life. Given the concerns around the spread of COVID, many organizations are making the judgment call that the upsides of mandating vaccination are going to offset the downsides. Well, kind of to tap onto my earlier point, I don't believe that's true. When you tell people that they have to undergo a medical procedure, I apologize for my dog barking. When you tell people that they have to undergo a medical procedure that they may or may not want to do, in order to work there, a lot of people get turned off just because they don't want to. Nobody should have to take a shot to work anywhere. I don't understand how that's a controversial take, because a lot of people over these last 2 years have either had COVID or have been vaccinated. I'm sure there's probably not a lot of people who haven't been exposed or haven't been vaccinated. I mean, I'm sure there's probably a few million people, but honestly, who knows how many people were exposed, and who knows how many people just didn't even have symptoms but just made antibodies because they didn't get exposed to a huge load. you know Nobody knows. You legally can be required to either get vaccinated or be tested for COVID-19 frequently. When the vaccines first became available to the public earlier this year, many legal experts said that employers could issue vaccine mandates if they chose to do so, as long as they provided exemptions for workers who either had medical conditions or sincerely held religious beliefs that prevented them from being vaccinated. What's up, dude? Buddy, Axton came in for a little visit here. And both the CDC and the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, EEOC, said that federal laws do not prohibit employers from requiring COVID-19 vaccinations. The U.S. Department of Justice also recently stated that employers can require their workers to get vaccinated. I agree that they can. I think it's really shitty to do, but I agree that they can. Now, this kind of gets to a different point that has kind of been widely debated in the libertarian sphere, actually in general, really. Down in Florida, they banned vaccine mandates. Now, if you interpret this in a vacuum, you would say, yes, it's wrong for the state to come down and tell a business owner what they can or cannot do. I think all libertarians agree there, at least principled libertarians. But the exception here is that when it comes from the federal government and they're telling all businesses that if you have over 100 employees, that they must be subjected to mandatory vaccinations or mandatory testing and masking. I hate to say it, but I'm kind of okay with seeing it being banned, because I don't think people should have to do that. Now, I know we're playing fast and loose with the non-aggression principle here, but, when it's the federal government telling people that they have to do something, and there is a very, very large amount of people who don't want to do this, then, once again, I'm not very upset about somebody telling them that, hey, look, you don't got to do this. Is it the most libertarian thing in the world? No, but at the same time, when it comes to the federal government and you're already struggling for workers, it's perfectly reasonable to do something in that's going to align with protecting that, or at least encouraging people to get back to work, because that's probably part of the reason why people are hesitant to get back to work, is because they can't find work because they don't want to take the vaccine. So it's easy for you to say, oh, just take the vaccine, but What if there are legitimate reasons why people can't take the vaccine? There have been risks of myocarditis, blood clots. The Johnson & Johnson vaccine got pulled for having so many blood clots. And look, I'm not trying to be anti-vaccine here. My mom took it. I know, honestly, probably well over 100 people who took it, and they're perfectly fine. But, for younger people who already had COVID, who have natural immunity, what is the upside to getting vaccinated? I really don't see one. Reading on here, perhaps the tipping point for employer vaccine mandates occurred in late July when President Biden announced that federal employees and contractors would either have to be vaccinated or comply with an ongoing process of being tested for COVID-19, wearing a mask, and following physical distancing policies. With more than 2 million employees across the nation, 28% whom are age 55 and older, the federal government is the country's largest employer. Can we just talk about how sad that is for a moment? The federal government is the largest employer for people 55 and older. Government jobs are very, 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 very rarely productive jobs because they do not produce anything. They are essentially theft, right? Because you're taking away the potential for somebody in the private sector to do something who would be more efficient and would not have to use violence or taxation, in other words, to get a paycheck. You don't have to coerce people and make them pay to pay for somebody else's salary. It's sad. On September 9th, Biden announced that the administration was making workplace vaccination requirements even more rigorous. Federal executive branch employees and all federal contractors will no longer have the option to submit to regular COVID testing instead of being vaccinated. And workers at healthcare facilities that receive federal funding from Medicare or Medicaid also will now be required to get vaccinated. Excuse me. On November 4th, the White House also released its vaccination requirements for private employers. Workers at private businesses that employ at least 100 people will be required to either be vaccinated or undergo weekly tests for coronavirus infection under the new rule from the U.S. Labor Department Occupational Health and Safety Administration. All workers at these companies will be eligible for paid time off in order to get vaccinated. That's another thing. So, I actually didn't know this until I read this now, but think about that. You're going to tell business owners that they have to pay their employees who are not being productive by being off to get vaccinated. You are literally requiring people to pay other people to not be productive, to not contribute, to not do their responsibility to their employer to be productive. You're going to require them to pay them to be off to go get vaccinated. Think about that. More than 80 million people nationwide could be affected by this new workplace vaccination requirement. Private companies that don't comply with this new federal rule could face steep fines. It's ridiculous. You could get fired if you don't comply with the vaccination/testing policy. The choice of whether to get vaccinated for COVID-19 can be a deeply personal decision, and employers take that into consideration when they set policy for their workplace. Quote, every organization knows there will be people who don't want to get vaccinated, or even if they agree with vaccination, don't like being mandated, Worrell says. I think that's reasonable. Even so, once a company establishes a vaccination policy, workers generally either have to comply or risk losing their jobs unless they qualify for a medical or religious exemption. In one high-profile example, CNN recently fired 3 unvaccinated employees who were allegedly violating the company's vaccination policy by coming into the office. You were fired for going into the office because you did not have the vaccine. All right. You may not qualify for unemployment benefits if you're fired for being unvaccinated. That's the last point. I'm not going to read that last paragraph. I'll link this below. Thousands of workers are opting to get fired rather than take the vaccine. From NPR. We'll take a brief read through this, give a little commentary. For 33 years, Carl Bonack worked at his dream job delivering weather forecasts on TV for what he considers one of the most challenging but beautiful spots in the United States, Michigan's Upper Peninsula. He became so popular that "That's What Carl Says" became a slogan at his station in the 1990s and even inspired a song. But Bonack's time as chief meteorologist for the news station TV6 came to an abrupt end last month. He was fired after refusing to comply with the vaccine mandate imposed by his station's corporate owner, Gray Television. Quote, "I just did not want to take the shot," says Bonack, who is 68. "I felt it was my right as a human being and a citizen of the U.S. to decide what I put in my body," which is a very, very reasonable stance. As libertarians, we believe in self-ownership, property rights, and obviously liberty. You have the decision, you have the right. It's not up to government, it's not up to anybody else to decide what you put in your body. It should not be illegal, and it should not be up for debate as to whether or not you have rights over your own body. Your rights should not be up for debate. That is your birthright. It is your birthright that you decide what goes into your body and how you treat yourself. Across the country, employees are firing workers for refusing to comply with the vaccine mandates. Some people are opting to quit their jobs rather than take the shot. These workers represent only a tiny fraction of overall employees, not even 1% in workplaces, but it can add up to thousands of people in many states. Washington State reports that so far, nearly 1,900 state workers, including the head football coach at Washington State University, have quit or been fired for refusing the vaccine. In Michigan, 400 workers at the Henry Ford Health System in Detroit walked away from their jobs. North Carolina-based Novant Health fired about 175 employees, and the list goes on, and we wonder why people are taking unemployment. The resistance has stirred great condemnation and controversy. Many view unvaccinated workers as a potential risk to the workplace, and overwhelmingly, workers have accepted and even embraced the science showing vaccines protect not only you, but those around you. So does natural immunity, but we can't talk about that. The vast majority of Americans have complied with vaccine mandates, but for the vaccine holdouts, walking away from a job comes at a cost, one that's bigger for some than others. In June, about 150 workers at the Houston Methodist Hospital System quit or were fired for refusing to get a vaccine out of a workforce of 26,000. One of them was registered nurse Jennifer Bridges, who has led the fight against the Houston Methodist. The hospital system announced its vaccine requirement March 31st. Bridges quickly became the public face of the movement against vaccine mandates. She had 5 job offers even before she was formally fired, 2 of them from hospitals that had not yet mandated the vaccine. She started a new job with a private nursing company on the very day she was fired from the Houston Methodist. She now cares for a single patient full-time and doesn't believe she'll face a vaccine mandate. Quote, "There's no Medicaid or Medicare funding. It's all private pay, so the government has no control over it," she says. Good for Bridget. For other Houston Methodist workers, getting fired has had graver consequences. Becky Melser has worked as a scheduler, setting up diagnostic procedures and surgeries from an office building across the street from the hospital. It was a career she was proud of. She had expected to retire from Houston Methodist in another 6 years or so. Instead, she was fired in June, 2 weeks shy of her 15-year mark. Just think about that. You would fire somebody who gave 15 years of their life, 15 years, 40 hours a week of their life to your company, and you're going to fire them over a personal medical decision. It's madness. It's absolute insanity. She applied for unemployment, but was denied, told she was ineligible because she'd been fired for misconduct for not following company policy. She's appealing the decision while trying to find another source of income. "If I wasn't married, I don't know what I would be doing." At 59, Melser has had a tough time finding work. She initially tried applying for other hospitals, but they too were going to require the vaccine. Now she's looking at customer service jobs outside of healthcare, even though they won't pay as much as her old job. She's also getting a start in real estate. Okay, don't care about this. not that much more interesting here. In Michigan, weatherman Bonack still has a couple side gigs doing forecasts for the local radio, mostly though he is settling into retirement a year and a half earlier than he had planned. He was fired last month. He had given the option of resigning. They wanted me to go off saying, hey, let's celebrate Carl Bonack, he says. He declined and said on his last day he just delivered his forecast like he's done for 33 years and walked out. That's pretty damn sad. Somebody that's worked for somewhere for 33 years, this article was dated October 24th, 2021. Someone that's worked somewhere for 33 years was just let go like that over not taking the vaccine. To me, it's absolute madness. I'm very, very thankful that where I work currently does not require it. A vast majority of the people that I work with have been vaccinated, and I'm okay with that. I don't think they're stupid. I don't think they're microchipped. I don't think they're going to die. I don't think they're infertile. I just think that they got a vaccine that's mildly effective, because when you have two presidents who really want to look like a superhero and pump this vaccine, and really, really, really rush it, you're going to get something that's just not that good, because, as with most other vaccines, they take years and years to develop, and it takes a lot of research and a lot of time. If you look at the way that science kind of has to play out, it is a very, very long, grueling process. Not that I would necessarily know, but, from reading studies and from hearing more educated people talk about how studies are performed, it makes sense. It takes a very, very long time to develop a vaccine that's going to be efficacious and for a long period of time. So, what these people essentially got was just a mildly effective vaccine that will probably lessen their symptoms, but just isn't going to be that effective in the long term. That's why we keep hearing about boosters. And it's very, very funny to hear the same people say that you need to be vaccinated, claim that we don't know how long natural immunity lasts. Well, we don't know how long vaccines last either. And I guess to their point too, and I hate to give anybody who's pumping vaccines super hard and vaccine mandates super hard, they say, don't worry about the long-term side effects of the vaccines. But to be fair, we don't know the long-term side effects of having COVID either. There are some COVID long haulers. I believe it's about 10% in a email I read from a functional medicine doctor. About 10% of people see long haul symptoms. Now, as to whether or not people see resolution, in a certain amount of time, I just don't know. I have not looked that far into it. But you don't know the long term consequences of COVID. We don't know the long term consequences of the COVID-19 vaccine. So that being said, my opinion is you should make the decision for yourself. If you think your risk profile is so that you should get vaccinated, then it's available. I'm not going to go get it because I had COVID. It wasn't a big deal. I got over it in a week. I felt a little under the weather for about 3 days. Just thought I just wasn't feeling good. And then all of a sudden I lost my taste and smell for about a week. I took alpha lipoic acid. I used a glutathione nasal spray to work the olfactory system, vitamin D, and zinc. And sure enough, after a week, all good. No problems, no long haul symptoms. To this day, I feel fine. And I believe that my immunity is robust and good. My fiance and I had our antibodies checked, and they were good. We had COVID-19 antibodies. And for anybody wondering, you can go to LabCorp and pay, it's like $10 to get your antibodies tested. So if you're curious, set up an appointment. We were able to do it, I believe, same day, and get our results within 2 or 3 days to show that we had antibodies to COVID-19 because we had a prior infection. I'll try to end this on a little bit of a bright note. I don't think there is a lot of patience for this anymore. You look at all the spending done by the Biden administration, and you look at, I believe it's 29 states are suing over vaccine mandates. I don't think the appetite is there. I don't think people want this, and I think people are rejecting it. 2022 and 2024 is going to be a huge, huge election. And everybody says it's the biggest election of our lifetime every 4 years. But I think it's different this time because people haven't been locked in their home um, in prior elections. And people are rejecting a lot of stuff that's kind of coming down the pipes. So hopefully there's good libertarians, good, liberty-minded Republicans, and even if there are any out there, good liberty-minded Democrats. Hopefully they're out there and ready to fight this tyranny that's coming down the pipes. I see great things in the Libertarian Party, the Mises Caucus, and even beyond. Um, some members of the GOP, the Young Americans for Liberty, and some of the other guys out there are doing good work. And I think that there will be a huge opportunity for a mass awakening of people to the message of liberty in the coming years. So, with that, this was In Liberty and Health. I wasn't going to turn this into a podcast, but been chatting here for a little bit. So, yeah, check out the podcast, subscribe, check out my other videos here on YouTube. That is Kyle Matovcik, KyleMatovcik, In Liberty and Health. Check it out. I got a whole bunch of cool interviews coming up in the coming weeks. I'm very, very excited for every single one of them. I'm on all streaming platforms. Also, if you're out there listening to this and you're in Pennsylvania, my band is opening for Stephen Piercy of Rat, December 1st at Jurgles. So hit me up for tickets and we'll get you squared away. We're looking forward to it. So until next time, everybody, in Liberty and Health.